he is so wonderful. He's very dear to my heart. He comes to Lunch with Lisa's on Wednesday and connect, and I've gotten to know him so well, and I just love him. I'm going to let him, so he's a dragon dad, he's Affirming Father, he does Rainbow Mutual, but I'm going to let him go ahead, unless Ken has something. I'm going to let you go ahead and tell us about your kids and your kids coming out, and then we'll just start that way or start however way you want.
So we have 2 kids, both are LGBTQ, so we're twice blessed. Had we known that they'd be so fabulous, we would have kept having more, but we didn't know at the time. And so we just have the 2. But let's see. So back November of 2015, our oldest child, Natalie at the time, Natalie came out to us. I was playing video games with my son. My wife came with kind of this white look on her face and it's like, Natalie has something to tell you. And so I went back there and Natalie's like, I like boys, but I also like girls. And so that kind of started us on our journey. To tell you the truth, not too long before that, a matter of months before that, Rach and I, a lot of debate was going on in the news about gay marriage and things along those lines. And Rach and I, my wonderful wife, Rachel, we were talking to each other. It was more of a process than it was an event. But I specifically remember that there was this time that we looked at each other after talking about things and we're like, I think anybody should be able to get married, even if they're gay. We want them to be happy too, right? And I remember we were talking about it. It was kind of this really like vulnerable and like secretive conversation that we're having. And it's like, but we were raised to believe that was wrong, but we feel it's right. And that was kind of a tender mercy for us before our kids came out, that our hearts started to change, I think, a little bit. And we started maybe trusting our hearts a little bit more than simply taking our marching orders, that we were able to kind of exercise those, well, what do we think muscles? And it helped quite a bit. When Natalie came out to us, we still didn't know what to say. It didn't help us there. I remember saying, no dating till you're 16? I don't know what to say, And so she went to bed and Rach and I just kind of calmly walked into our bedrooms and started like jumping on the bed, like, what just happened? Is this our life? What's going on? And so Natalie, neither of my kids right now are very good at titles or labels as far as how they identify, other than queer. But Natalie came out to us a second time, saying that she wanted to go by Nate, and so we still at home call her Nate, and use they them. We used they them pronouns and Nate for quite some time. We were actually the first in the state of Utah to get a gender X marker. So we kind of went through, battled that with the vital records, going and talking to the lady there. She's like, why do you don't want to do this? This is just going to confuse people. And I'm like, well, the judge kind of told you that you should, so not asking for your opinion. And then we had to actually go and get the driver's license. All that changed. Since then, Nate's kind of given up a little bit on all, not given up, but relaxed from grasping onto labels. And so we use she, her pronouns now. We still call her Nate at home. A lot of kids call her Natalie, and just pretty much anything goes at this point. A little bit later, Cooper came out to us. I remember I was on a walk with Coop, and he had just spent a whole day playing with his best friend, and he's like, Papa, I think I'm gay for so-and-so. Does that mean I'm gay? And I'm like, it could, I don't know, or it could just mean that you just really like him, enjoy him. And it's about a year later that in the car with Rachel, he's like, I'm bi. Yeah, I'm bi. Um, because he likes girls, but he's also has this thing going on with boys. And it wasn't until we were talking to an older couple, they were in their 20s, older than Cooper, and they a gay couple, and they were for a long time they were telling us the story on how this one of our friends is like, I thought I was bi because I liked girls, I liked hanging out with girls, I was comfortable with girls, but I only crushed on boys. And Cooper's like, ding. He's like, yeah, okay, all right. And then we were talking later. He's like, so Papa, we had just gone to see the Greatest Showman. And he's like, so Papa, that the show The Greatest Showman? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, do you know the tattooed guy? And I'm like, no. And he's all, yeah. So that to me was the telltale sign. He's like, okay, that's
I like
that.
boys.
I understand him now, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Nate's been all her life has been extremely comfortable standing out and being different. Cooper's different than that. He likes fitting in and not being different. It was really surprising to me that even after as loudly as we tried to love Nate as she was going through all this and figuring things out, that when the time came for Cooper to tell us, he admitted how scared he was. And that was really shocking to me, that he would be nervous at all about it. It was actually lunch at Lisa, we were talking about this, and somebody suggested the fact that 99.99% confident that the folks are going to be completely cool with this, but that fraction of a percent that they're not cool with this is so life changing and shattering that there was a lot of anxiety in there. And so that was kind of interesting to me. Wow.
So Dave, there's something that really struck me. Your kids were so comfortable with the two of you. I mean, for a kid, I think yesterday or this morning when we talked, Cooper said that he was, I think you said Cooper was 10 when he first started expressing, like when he said, I'm gay for my friend, which is really funny language. But
Yeah.
for a 10-year-old boy to feel comfortable enough, talk a little bit about that, because you established something in your family that is really remarkable, that's very unusual.
Well, I feel really blessed how communicative the kids are. Like, I process through talking, and so when Nate originally came out, both Rachel and I, we knew that this doesn't change anything, and we were able to, with our love, I mean, if anything, it gives us more understanding of the kid that we love, right? And that's a good thing. And so um, Nate was really good at allowing us to ask dumb questions. And so we spent a lot of time out on the swing that Cooper later started calling the gay swing, because we'd just go out on the swing in the summer and we'd just be out there talking about, like, what does gender fluid mean? What's non-binary? I don't, help me understand, what it means to you and how they're different and all of that. So I think there was, I feel really blessed on how communicative the kids were. If I had a kid that was kind of locked in a little bit, I think my mind would just absolutely blow. Like if I had to like keep quiet and not talk about things. But I think maybe just the fact that my kids didn't feel threatened from the get-go allowed them to keep talking. And I credit that all to my wife, because she's amazing.
I agree. She is very amazing. I wanted, in Lunch with Lisa, it was one of Nat's phases, and I loved it so much, and I can't remember it completely, but was it queer chill or gender chill? That was
Gender chill. Yeah, so we
chill.
did a lot of kind of figuring out which labels fit, trying them on for size and whatnot. So I remember at one point, Nate wrote a poem, and in that poem, she's like, kind of like saying who she is, and she says, "I'm non-binary, pan-romantic, gray sexual," and I'm like, so that's the thing. What does it mean? You know, and what a beautiful conversation to have with your kids. Like, what does this mean? I mean, to be frank with you, I was just off. I never had these conversations with my folks. I was just off my mission, and I was down at UVSC because I was too stubborn to shave my beard to go to BYU. And I was in a bathroom stall, and somebody had written on the bathroom stall, "I like boobies." And I was like, it was like so profound to me. I was like, yes, I too. I was like this coming out moment for me. I was like, I too like boobies. But here I am talking with my kids about non-binary. So that talks about gender. I don't feel either male or female. Pan-romantic, which means I can fall in love with whomever, without regards to parts. Gray sexual, it's like asexual, except for just maybe not sure. And what a beautiful conversation. And so we kind of went through, trying to figure out who she is, and she kind of settled on gender chill. Whatever. You want to use they, them, you want to use he, him, she, her for me. Okay. So, yeah.
So, what's so interesting to me about that, Dave, is that you didn't feel obligated to explain her life to her. Somehow you were open enough to hear her explain it to you. And I don't know how many of us as parents feel like, oh, I guess I don't have to have every answer, and I don't have to have this figured out for my kid. I can be open-ended enough to let them express who they are. It's kind of interesting. And do you know how you got there? Somehow you got there by yourself.
So here's the deal. So a couple of thoughts. Number one is, I think we just love our kids, right? They're just amazing kids. And so who they are, that's who we love. I do feel a little bit of this obligation to try and describe to people outside of the family. In settings like this, I actually feel very insecure on how to describe my kids. But within the family, just like you're saying, it's not a thing. It's just the kids will, whoever they are, whoever they love. Yeah, we're on board with that. But when we get in settings like this, I do feel very inadequate, because I feel obligated to try and explain them to other people. And it's a weird dynamic. So I don't think I'm completely free of it. Just within the family, I think we just love our kids.
Yeah, we do just love our kids. Tell us about Rainbow Mutual.
So, 4 years ago, so we had known, Nate had come out to us, we had known, and it was general conference weekend, and Nate had spent the night over at a friend's house, and Nate's like, so I came out to my friend, and we're like, great, that's great. We want to be careful because not everybody like believes the same way as we do on some things. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, for example, you go to the temple every week, and if you marry a girl, that's something that because the policy had just happened just a few months before that, that's something that's going to be an issue with some members of the church. And she's like, what? And she goes and she fires off this text. She's like, Bishop, so my papa says that I'm gay, by the way. My papa says that if I marry a girl, that I can't go to the favorite place on the earth, in the temple. What is up with this? Right? And so she fires off this text. And luckily, we had a really good bishop that affirmed love in his reply. But that kind of was like, oh crap, we need support. We need this support system. And we had just met Janet and Mark Moffat within like the day before, and they're mama and dragon dads. And so we got on a text with them and we're like, help, what do we do? And so they got on the Mom and Dragon phone line or Facebook page and kind of said what's going on. And Rainbow Mutual was just starting. 2 weeks later was the very first Rainbow Mutual. Phil and Heidi Berry put together this thing. They had a petting zoo. So we went out there, and I was that lost parent. Phil talks about, he's like, yeah, this big guy with the beard, and I was all decked out in like camo and all that kind of like masculine like stuff, I didn't have my purse. I had my tactical satchel like Jack Bauer had in 24, like super manly. You don't call it a purse. And so I went there, and I was like one of those lost parents just looking around, and my world was completely different. So it was like, at a dance, I can identify who the threats are. Okay, standing too close to that boy. And now I'm like, and I was kind of like panicking inside. And then I just saw my kid smile and blossom. It was cold. We're on the way home, and she was just chattering, shivering because it was so cold. And so we've been involved with Rainbow Mutual ever since. This Friday, I think, would be our 5th petting zoo if it wasn't for this little thing called COVID-19. But yeah, so, but been involved with that ever since, and just absolutely fell in love with it. My 2 favorite things about Rainbow Mutual, number 1 is when the parents, we say wallflower parents can come, but you'll see this parent come and kind of act like I acted, like I am so far out in the deep end right now, like, oh crap, like I didn't read anything about this. How do you raise your kids at church, and you see these parents, and then I can't tell you how many times I've heard a parent say something along the lines of, I've not seen my child smile this much or laugh this much in a long time. And it's kind of one of those, by their fruits you shall know them kind of a thing. Like these parents start to say, oh my gosh, my kid is just coming out of their shell. Because what Rainbow Mutual does, and this is my second thing that I like about it most, is that it takes the LGBTQ thing off the table. Or maybe it's just on the table and completely there like everybody else. But it allows kids to gain social skills and learn how not to be complete idiots to each other, right? And like learn these skills where everybody's on the same ground. That's something that I had my whole life. I didn't have anything, this thing that I was worried about was so how people would react. Anyway, I guess that's privilege, right? To see these kids be able to have that at Rainbow Mutual, I think it's just absolutely beautiful.
I think it's wonderful. How many kids come? Are it like, how many?
So we probably are between 30 and 50 kids. We do it once a month.
That is so great. And you do Rainbow Mutual also at Encircle too, right? Is it?
Yeah, so it started out, Phil and Heidi Berry started it, and then we merged in with Encircle. So now it's an Encircle thing.
Me too. But
Yeah.
but the three couples are still involved with it every week. That's so cool. Awesome.
Hey, Dave, one thing I really liked about what you were saying is when you first start going, you're doing this whole dressed in camo with your man bag and this whole thing, but something's shifting inside you, you know, where you're in a process yourself where you're letting go of some of these ideas that you've had about who you are even. And
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, because I think that's really interesting what's going on inside.
I'm a little embarrassed to talk about that, just to tell you the truth, because like my brother-in-law, we talked a lot as the kids were growing up. We're like, we're going to do these like commando campouts and we're going to teach our kids how to be men, right? We're like, we're going to like eat dirt and we're going to like chew raw rattlesnakes and all this kind of stuff and teach them to be men. And here I am now with my son who's trying to figure out what it's like to be a gay man. He's painted his nails for the first time this week and absolutely loving it. And I think it's absolutely beautiful for him to kind of come in to his own. But yes, I had to give up a little bit of the things like my tactical satchel. That was my purse, you know? So yeah, it definitely has changed my outlook on life, and just, it's, you kind of have to just let go of everything that you thought you knew and really trust your heart and your core as far as what's right for your kids, and have that intuition. And that's a scary thing to do, to let go of the formula that I thought I knew, you know, as I started raising kids. There's so much security in formula, and there's so much fear in letting go, but it's a beautiful path.
Wow. You know, when Sue and I first went to the volunteer training at Encircle last summer, I was the only dad in the place. And several people came up to me after the training and were talking to me. And there were a lot of gay couples there, and a lot of just all, you know, people all over the LGBTQ spectrum. And so many people said, I really wish my dad could be here. And I was struck by how meaningful it is that a dad, people kind of expect maybe a little bit more, that a mom might be supportive. But what I kept thinking about is, so often as dads, we feel like we just don't have permission. Like we have to hold back from our kids if they're not performing in this way that we've always been taught. And letting go of that, just making that decision, I'm going to love my kid and I don't need anyone to tell me it's okay to do it, it was a big process that I had to go through. And so I really relate to what you're saying. I think we've experienced the same thing, and I'm sure any other dad that's on this call has experienced that.
Okay, we want to hurry and learn a little bit more about you, Dave, so that we can open it up to question and answers. I'm getting prompted from my person behind the computer. Tell us about Dragon Dad.
So you've heard of mama dragons, right? So you've heard of, there's Relief Society, and then there's Elders Quorum. Relief Society puts out flowers and like tablecloths, and Elders Quorum's like, why would I put flowers on that? I'm just going to sit on it when I read the lesson word for word, right? So Dragon Dads have been a slower start than Mama Dragons. And I think the imagery of Mama Dragon is so beautiful. You got this heartfelt, you know, your traditional gender roles, mom, loving, nurturing, but will breathe fire and bite your head off if you go after their kid, right? I think that's absolutely beautiful. I think sometimes dads kind of have the fire and the scales and the teeth, and that's almost a barrier from their kids. And so as dragon dads within the group, what we try and do is, yes, of course, we'll breathe fire and bite heads off for our kids, but I think there needs to be a little bit of softening of the dads for their kids to be emotionally there for them the way that they need it. And so as dragon dads, we strive just to be better dads for our children. That's our goal, is to be better dads for our children, and to help with LGBTQ led initiatives, not to try and go out there and fix the world or anything along those lines, but to show up and put away tables and chairs, like we were meant to do. but yeah, so dragon dads. Say again?
How long ago did you start Dragon Dad?
So Dragon Dad started back in, I think, in 2014, and it was dormant for quite some time. I started in 2016, so about April of 2016, and it was dormant there for a little while. But over the last couple of years, it's really grown. We're now about 1,000 dads across, I don't know, 5 or 6 different countries. And it's pretty amazing, the group. We got some pretty crusty guys in the group that will really just kind of, well, this is the way I think it is, and so it's got to be right? And but I tell you, there are dads in there that are very much leading by example and can talk with other dads in a loving way. There's been a lot of dads in the group just come and say, I'm part of other groups, and all it is fighting and everybody having opinions. But some very touching posts from dads in the group, just talking about how much it's needed to have other dads that know what it feels like to be in the situation. So.
And is it like, are you getting word of mouth? You don't advertise, right? It's just word of mouth now that everybody, it's just, or how, that's how it, people are.
Yeah. So like Mama Dragons will get things like, we'll do interviews and things like that. We're on the Today Show that just aired again here recently. So we get new influx of dads from things like that. But
how did they find you? How did they find you? The Today Show to go.
I think they just know how to. They just know how to sniff out awesomeness, I think, is what it is. I don't. I think the story of dads that are affirming fathers, as I like to call us, I think that's sadly a unique story. Like when they came out to interview us for the Today Show, they really gave us a lot of accolades for like, wow, this is super amazing. And they were really touched. But what's amazing to me is not once did anybody ask me, do you help your kids with your homework? Do you help them brush their teeth? Are you there for them? Are you nice to them? Really the level for us to get attention is we're not complete jerks to our children. And that's a little sad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love a world where we're not unique at all, but right now I think it's a unique story that you got a group of crusty old men who just love on their LGBTQ kids.
So awesome.
Yeah.
Everyone has a chance to watch that. It's amazing that but it was on the 3rd hour again just a couple of weeks ago, so you can Google it that way. Plus I think I'm posting it a lot, so you can always find it on Dave or somewhere, but it's really cool to watch that.
Yeah. So one thing about Dragon Dads that I've personally really needed. So again, traditional gender roles, it doesn't have to be this way, but it seems to be this way for me, is I feel like sometimes if my kids are struggling, there's a lot of dads with kids that are struggling. As dads, sometimes we feel like we need to be there for our kids and for our wife. Here's an example. So we have 2 kids, but we actually had our first child was stillborn, died in the womb the day before she was due. And I remember we were just newlyweds, and I remember at that time, I stayed up all night because I just couldn't allow myself to sleep comfortably while my wife was in pain, while my family was in pain. I couldn't allow myself to do that. And so I took all that burden on me, and by staying up all night, it just exacerbated that burden. And I was completely lost and overwhelmed. And I think sometimes as dads, we get that way with our LGBTQ kids, that we need to be there. I can't think of anything worse in life than seeing your kids struggle. And sometimes we have to put on a brave face for our spouse to be there for them. And I think that's, anyway, I've noticed within the Dragon Dads group and our Affirming Fathers breakfast that we have, there are other dads that feel the same way as I feel. We, in fact, just here this last Affirming Fathers breakfast that we have a breakfast once a month. I was kind of overwhelmed, and I couldn't go. I had enough, right? And but somebody texted me. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to make it. And somebody's like, well, I need you to pick something up. I'm like, oh, crap. So I ended up going, and the whole way in, it's like, I'm just going to grab it and go. I'm just going to grab it and go. And he was in the middle of the group. So I sat down. I'm like, but I'm not staying. And a friend of mine, another Dragon Dad, Mark, he's like, hey, it looks like you're carrying a burden. And I was, and I unloaded on him. And I looked around, and, other dads joined in on the conversation. And I looked around at the other dads, and knowing their stories, I knew that they had been there. I knew that they shared that burden in their own way. So yeah, it's a good group of dads.
So awesome. And that feeling is, it's, it's just like it is in Encircle and Mama Dragons, and you don't feel alone. You feel supported and wonderful. And so Affirming Fathers, did that just start not so long ago, or you went from Dragon Dads and Affirming is just kind of getting together? Or tell us a little bit about that.
So Dragon Dads was an online group that really wasn't doing a lot for some time. And there was a lot with, so with church, I found that there's a saying, something along the lines is, you don't know how strong the current of conformity is until you're swimming a little bit different than everybody else. And I found myself at church, I didn't fit in anymore. And I can't point the finger of blame at anybody, but I was lonely. That's what it was. And so I started this group, just a breakfast get together. I called it Affirming Fathers. And so yeah, it's been a few years of that. I think we're in our 3rd year now that we've been doing it once a month, and we just started doing it twice a month, one down in Utah County as well, before COVID-19.
So amazing.
But yeah.
You're cool. You're the cool dad. You're awesome.
I do great dad jokes.
You are. Ken, do you have anything to say? We're going to open it up to questions and answers.
Yeah, no, there's so much to talk about with Dave. You're also involved in this LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. You've got a lot of things going on. You just dived in. And tell us just a little bit about that, and then we'll open it up to questions.
So my world right now is all like LGBTQ youth, right? And a lot of them are really struggling with family, with the world, the church. And so I see a lot of struggling youth. And I found I needed to see LGBTQ adults so that my kids could see them and model after them and see success and see happiness and see this light at the end of the tunnel. So through work, there's an LGBTQ business resource group that I'm a part of. We marched in Pride. And there's the Chamber of Commerce, which is absolutely Utah LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce, which is amazing because almost anything that you're looking for, from roofing to mortgages to buying a house to finance, accounting, you have these LGBTQ owned, ran organizations. And so I'm part of that to give me hope and role models for my kids. And I'm lonely and I need friends. So everything keeps coming back to that.
I don't think you are, but you're not lonely. You're awesome. But you're great.
So I think we're at a really good place to open it up for questions. Kayleen, do you agree?
Yeah.